Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about Children of Dune by Frank Herbert. So as usual, we're going to talk non-spoilery thoughts and opinions up front and then move over to the spoiler section where we can talk in more detail. So with that being said, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and let's begin. So, Children of Dune picks up 9 years after where Dune Messiah left off, right after Paul walks into the desert blind, presumed dead for, all time and all that stuff. So now we have Aaliyah, who is working as the regent. She is the ruler of the entire empire until Ganima and Leto II come of age. And the I guess terraforming, we'll call it, of Arrakis has continued to the point where Fremen don't even have to wear steel suits. They're out wearing regular clothes, and clouds have even been seen on the desert planet. So in this story, we got a lot of interesting philosophical overtones, as always, from Frank Herbert. To me, this book kind of feels a lot like the idea of the new generation trying to take over in order to fix the mistakes of the previous generation. Because, as we know, Leto II and Ganima were preborn, just like their aunt Aaliyah was. And it seems like because they're the children of a Quizart Tataract, they seem to have a little bit more control. Even at 9 years old, they have very galvanized core personalities to themselves, but they're able to just thumb through all the personalities and knowledge of all their past lives and stuff very easily. The story really gets going when Lady Jessica comes back to Arrakis and she starts to notice that Aaliyah is behaving strangely. And as a result, she ends up having to kind of work with someone else in order to deal with the situation. So we get a lot of this idea of poor ruling and having to almost betray people, but you're doing it really for the greater good of everyone and not actively being malicious against anyone. So it's a really interesting kind of power dynamic that plays out here. In a lot of ways, this story becomes a bit of a game of chess because there's some underhanded things going on, and there is there are people that know about what's going on, but they have to kind of keep it quiet. They don't want to expose that they know what's going on, so they have to basically move in the shadows and do some subterfuge and all this stuff. And it's actually a lot of fun, I think, especially when we get to see a little bit more of the skills of the Bene Gesserit, the things that they've learned and stuff, mostly through Anima and some of Irulan, or attempts through Irulan and stuff. And we get to learn a lot more about this idea of prescience and this whole this mental buildup of past lives kind of thing that happens, and the effects it can have on people, as well as the negative effects. Some of the effects that we've been warned about since the first book, but it hasn't come up until now. So I think it's really interesting, and it plays out in really interesting ways and very tragic ways, actually. Um, so while this is the third book in this first trilogy of the series, it really does feel like almost a prequel to a setup, because the Paul story really feels like it ended, with Doom Messiah, and it makes sense because it kind of did. So this one feels like a huge setup for a lot of things that are going to happen, because this very much, obviously given by the name, is Children of Dune. We're focusing on the children, so it kind of feels like this transitory period. Also considering they're still preteen aged. I don't even think they're 14 or 9 years old. Yeah, because the last book ended when they were born, and it's been 9. Yeah, so they're 9 years old. So it's really interesting, and I like some of the things that are planted in here that basically make great promises for later. So I'm really looking forward to God Emperor Dune, which is the next one in the series. So before we jump over to spoilers, let me ask you all, and make sure you leave a comment to feed that YouTube algorithm. So if you had the opportunity to have the kind of prescience that Paul had, where you can basically see the future, but there's almost no easy ways to do it, you basically got to pick the path of least death, would you want that kind of future sight, or would you prefer regular future sight? Let me know about that in the comments down below. I feel like this type of future sight is more cursed than it is gift, so I wouldn't want it at all. I would want basic premonitions if it was something like that, but I don't know. So yeah, let me know about that in the comments down below. Let's go ahead and jump over to spoilers. So spoiler warning for Children of Dune by Frank Herbert. So one of the coolest things slash tragic things that happens in this book is we've been warned about the idea of abomination from the first book. The whole thing that Sister Mohayim, I think her name is, the old lady who did the Gung Jabbar thing to Paul in the first book. Like her whole warning thing about an abomination and being afraid of Paul becoming an abomination, all this stuff. It was never fully explained. It was just kind of vaguely hinted at and stuff. But in here we get a full understanding of it because Aaliyah sadly is an abomination, which is really just short, not even shorthand. It's just a different word to use instead of the word possession. Because what's happened is Aaliyah has been completely possessed by the past life, the ego personality of the memories of Baron Harkonnen, and that ego personality is still kind of alive. So it suppressed Aaliyah to the point where now she exhibits physical differences. Like her eyes are different and she has like his physical tells and things like that. So she's like completely possessed, and to the point of like it's like irreversible at this point. Or like they don't seem to have any knowledge of any way to reverse it in general. So when Jessica shows up to Arrakis, she almost immediately notices this in Aaliyah, and then she notices within the twins that there's no signs of abomination there. So she's like, okay, and all this stuff, and then we have to basically get everything going because what the Baron is doing through Aaliyah is trying to get her to force the transition of Arrakis to like a more green planet more and more, because if it becomes a water planet like something like Caladan or more Earth-like or something like that, then all the worms will die and the spice will be gone, and that'll basically destroy the economy of the entire universe, which is something the Baron will want because, you know, revenge from beyond the grave. So I thought it was really interesting that that kind of sets off this entire chess game that has to happen, where Jessica is like working against her daughter and she has to try to help the twins kind of get out, but then Leto ends up getting kidnapped, which triggers this really awesome situation. And I know this kind of, it's almost a trope now at this point. Like Frank has to get everybody to the desert at some point. Like they just got to get them to the desert somehow. So Leto gets kidnapped and basically is forced to undergo the same spice trance thing that like the Reverend Mothers go through. Why is this hard to remember? Because they go through the same thing that like Paul went through and that all of them went through and stuff. So he basically gets an epic spice related power upgrade, and he ends up seeing the future so completely clearly that he finds what he calls the golden path, and that's like the perfect path for humanity to like fix all this stuff caused by Paul's interference and stuff, because Paul couldn't find the golden path and stuff. So like there's a lot of stuff that happens there, but he also does this crazy thing where there's these little larva type things that are in Arrakis. They're like, I mean, it feels like they're basically larva forms of the worms, but he has like a bunch of them get like on his body and it forms a suit, and it becomes like a symbiote suit, and it like forms to him. So it's not even a suit, it's just his skin now, or you know, shell over him, because it's not you know, it's like armor, it's not really skin. It's creepy and it's kind of gross, but it seems really cool. He basically has an exoskeleton and he's part like sandworm, and he has like super strength and he's jumping around and all this kind of stuff. It's really cool. But then like I go back to this idea, like isn't he like 9 or 10? Like how weird is that? Like he's just this insanely powerful 10-year-old like just hopping around, and like I mean of course he's epically smart and you know mature because of billions of lives and all that kind of stuff. But it's like such an interesting thing to me. I think about this little guy just like hopping dunes, like dunes, it's just so funny. But I think it's really cool what he does though at the end, and we find out that the preacher, the guy who was running around spewing all this negative stuff about the religion of Muad'Dib, is actually Muad'Dib. It's Paul. So my speculation that when he walked into the desert he didn't die was correct, which is cool. But he then does die here. He allows himself to basically get killed by a mob after he talks to Leto the second and basically capitulates and says, okay, I can't stop you or anything, so good luck with your golden path, and I guess I'll do what I can to help, which basically martyrs himself. And like Leto even like tries to help Aaliyah. He's like, I've learned so much, and like because of his crazy acid trip with the spice, he's like, I've learned so much and I know so much about all this stuff, I can help you deal with this abomination thing. And she basically gets control for like a second, because the Baron basically comes out and take full control, and when she gets control she basically throws herself off a balcony. So sadly we lose Aaliyah, one of the coolest characters, or at least conceptually cool, because she doesn't do a whole lot, but she's conceptually really cool, and she's the first preborn that we met, and it just sucks that she died in such a tragic way. But she's a great example of what an abomination is, and we kind of really understand that fear with the twins, even though now what Leto the second is like so beyond anything anybody else could have ever figured out or imagined that he would have been. So now it's really interesting, and I can't wait to hop into the next book and see what's going on. But I think before that, I'm going to jump back to the Brian Herbert stuff and do Winds of Dune and probably that other one that I forget the name of before we jump into that. So stay tuned for those. So I'm going to go ahead and end the review here and ask, since you're here for the spoilers, if you have the opportunity, would you let those weird larva things like attach to your skin and become a symbiote in order to get those extra powers and stuff? You basically leave humanity behind to get those extra powers that Leto second half. Would you do that? I don't know if I would. I'm still kind of back and forth on it. So let me know about that in the comments down below. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And I will talk to y'all next time. Peace.